Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, Senior Writing Coach for Defend and Publish. Welcome to episode 30, Easing into Writing. In this episode, we're going to talk about one of those four aspects of writing habits that I talked about last week. As a quick recap, if you didn't listen last week, I talked about writing habits being made up of systems, reading scholarly literature, conducting and analyzing research, and then the actual writing itself. And certainly in all of those stages, there's lots of minor parts, but to me, those are the big chunks that make up writing habits. And this week, this week and a couple of weeks after, we're going to talk about the actual writing chunk of writing habits. So what do you do when you actually sit down or stand up at your walking treadmill desk for your academic writing process? What are some tasks that you can be doing? And I'm always surprised at how much this is not discussed. So what we tend to think of, and especially I know as a doctoral student, this is what I thought, is I saw all of my professors go to their offices, they went and closed their doors, and then the next thing I knew, there were some publications. I didn't know what they did in there. I knew they were doing some writing, other than my mentor that I worked with. So a little shout out to Dr. Christine Blair. She was a fabulous mentor, and she was somebody that we actually got to write together. So I got to see her writing process. But I just wanted, just in general, as a doctoral student, it was a little bit of a mystery how faculty writing got done. And I know that I have written an article about what professors do during a writing session, because I know that this is something that many students and even new faculty are wondering. We all wonder kind of what everybody's doing. So I will make sure I have a link to that in the show notes. But I wanted to talk today about the actual easing in and transitioning from whatever you were doing before you got to a writing session to the actual writing itself. So today I am going to share a screen just with the article front page. So this is not something that those of you that are listening to it on audio only need to see. All that's on my screen right now is just the article. It's in Inside Higher Education, and it's called What Do Professors Do During a Writing Session? So if you want to check it out, you can. I'll have a link to it in the show notes, but I wanted to just get it up there so you could see where it is. So one of the things I talk about in this article, just kind of in a little snippet, because Inside Higher Education articles are more, bite-sized chunks. But one of the processes that I talk in there about is how to actually ease into a writing session. So I've described my writing process many times about how I like to write in the library. But I know when I was in the first couple of years as a faculty member, I had a 4-4 load. I'm at a comprehensive institution with about 4,000 students, extremely heavy student advising load, heavy teaching load. At that time, I was transitioning to become the writing program administrator, so I had some administrative load in there. So it was a busy schedule, and probably more importantly for this discussion, it was all over the place, where I would have a class from 10 to 11, and then a meeting from 11:30 to 12:30, and then another class from 1 to 2. And it was all these little chunks of different things all day long during during my academic life during that time. And so one of the things I know I had to get good at was easing into writing in those smaller bits, because sometimes I could grab an hour, or sometimes I could get an hour and 15 minutes between different things, even a half hour. But what I found for new faculty, especially, and I work with new faculty at my institution, is that it's very difficult to come off of teaching a class and immediately dive right into some writing and make some brilliant thoughts. So you really need some strategies to think about how to ease into writing. Another transition point is certainly on the way to work. So for me, I almost always, whenever I could do it, try to write first. I do write at work because I hate writing at home, but I try to do it, drive to work and go right to my writing place, which is the library usually. I try to do that right before I get to anything else, because I know I'm going to get interrupted, but also because I like to do that bigger brain work as soon as I've got that first open moment. That may not be you. And I know for years I was an afternoon writer, where I loved writing after lunch. I would do all my teaching in the morning. I would have lunch. Lunch was the transition. And then I would use the afternoon hours to do some writing before I picked up my kids from daycare. So one of the ways to think about academic writing and easing into it is that there has to be a way that resets your brain to get ready to do something else. Certainly teaching is one where you've been talking for a while, probably. You might have maybe a class that's tough to teach and it's a bit of a stressor for you. You might have an autoimmune disorder or something like that gives you, it's tough to teach. It's very physically demanding. It's physically demanding for any of us. So One of the things that to think about then with easing into academic writing is what is coming right before your actual writing session. And ideally you want to think about think about a spot to write where whatever's coming before it isn't going to totally derail you. So I know for years I sat on this one committee where everybody liked to have a good old fashioned faculty fight about some issues. And, I know that after that meeting, I could not write like that. After that meeting, I wanted to go to the gym. So it actually was really great for establishing my gym habit, but yeah, not so great for writing. So finding that slot in the schedule where you have energy to write and that there's nothing coming before it that's going to be really draining is always a good option. And that may not be your only, that may not be your choice this upcoming semester if you're trying to think about where you might do that. But let's talk about some easing in tasks that might help make that transition easier. So one of the things that I try to think about with academic writing is I try not to think about it the second I get there without having thought about it before. So let me explain what I mean by that. Usually the night before, I know I'm going to write the next day. And I do try to write most weekday mornings if I can. I mean, there's one or two that I may miss, but I try to write every weekday morning if I can, take the weekends off. So the night before, I do try to take 5 minutes before bed and just say, all right, what is it that I need to do on this writing tomorrow? What is the big thing that I really need to do? And I try to think about this in very broad strokes. So for example, I know the writing project that I'm currently working on now, I know that I need to reread my methodology section. I need to make sure that I talked about the limitations in enough detail. And then I need to get into the discussion. I've started kind of outlining it, but I need to start writing it. I know that's something I need to do, but just having that little chat with myself a couple minutes before I close out the previous day, that does help me remember when I get to the writing session the next day, what did I say I was going to do again? There's other things that you can do to ease in. Another way that I do this sometimes, if I'm worried I'm going to forget, is I'll write a little post-it to myself and just slide it on the inside of my laptop. So wherever I left off on that writing, I will have a little note there that when I open it up, don't forget, these are the 3 things that you wanted to work on. Another task or another tip that I've said in this article about what professors do is sometimes leaving yourself some highlights or some notes on the actual draft. And then you can read through and find, say, those bracketed notes or those highlights that you need to go back to. And the idea is that you don't have to go to the writing session totally blank and it's just going to start happening for you. Because even now, after 20 years of being an academic, that certainly has not been the case for me. Other things to think about would be, what are you doing on the way to get to your writing session? So certainly those are the little notes you can leave yourself, so you've got a little bit of a plan to get started. But other things that you can do is think about, how are you going to actually physically or mentally transition to that session. So for some of us, it might be just a walk across campus if we're on a physical campus. For others, it might mean closing out our Zoom if we're teaching online or doing meetings online, maybe getting a snack or a cup of coffee, and then, coming back to actually working on writing, maybe even in a different room. So I had this very interesting discussion the other day with several faculty members about, just doing everything on your computer. So now all the teaching, all the meetings, all the writing, everything's on that. And so we talked about the importance of just changing a location. So that might even mean, going somewhere else to shift to writing. So that's certainly one way that you can think about it. Another way that you might do it is just take a 10-minute walk between whatever it is that you're doing. If you're able to physically get out and do that, that might be another way to just kind of clear out your head and kind of retrain your thoughts to think about, what is the writing coming up? What is it that I really need to do? And then another thing that you can do, and I've talked about this in the podcast, Make Writing an Event. That's one of my favorites. That's why I talk about that one a lot. But I really like the idea of, you're going to drive to wherever it is, your coffee shop, your library, back home to go write. What if you're going to get a drive in there, or even a walk with headphones? I like the idea of having a pregame playlist to get yourself kind of pumped up and in the mood. So I do make some academic writing pregames for myself on Spotify, and I've shared them. I've actually just made a new one for this episode. So I don't, obviously everybody's musical tastes are different, but I just like a certain kind of music to kind of get me in the mood, ready to go. Yes, you can do this. Let's go. And that has really helped also, because it sort of shifts my mindset to, okay, this is what I'm doing. It's fun to write. It can be a joyful academic, process. Certainly not all the time, but I try to kind of remind myself that the writing process can be fun, and, what a privilege it is to be able to do that kind of work and have the little space to do a little bit of writing. So those are certainly some strategies. A couple other ones that might help would be, obviously, you can go to the old standby of reading what you wrote, in the last session to kind of remind yourself where you want to go. I know that in the last week's podcast, I talked about the link between the academic reading process and writing as one of the areas of writing habits. And so for some of us, just taking maybe 15 minutes to reread an article or reread some notes we took on an article where we kind of talked back to that research or related that article's research to our own project. Sometimes that can be a really good way to kind of kick yourself into starting to write. If you're collaborating with anybody, I've done this with collaborative projects where I just go back and look at the email trail on that project to remind myself where I am. Project tracking, if you keep track on a master chart like I do, you can actually take a look and see what's in there and see what are the steps I need to do. So it's a lot to keep track of. And certainly in writing sessions, you might not be working on only one project. So if you're working and juggling on multiple projects, you might even think about how to carve up the time. I've done this a lot I try to get like an hour and a half to a 2-hour block. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll make sure the big project or my priority project that has to get done, or the one that I need to get more done on, I'll work on that for, say 45 minutes of the time. And then the last 15, I'll work for, on the new project, which might be making slides for a conference, or however I divide up that hour. I've done it in a 2-hour block where I've done an hour and a half on my big project, the last half hour on making slides for a conference presentation or something like that. So, always I try to use the writing time at the start for whatever the harder project is. And sometimes I'll flip it around where on certain days I only will work on certain projects. So for example, I'm not a super great writer on Fridays. By the end of the week, it's been a long week. So sometimes Fridays I just reserve for working on just conference presentations, which for me are not as taxing as working on, developing scholarly writing in an academic article. So hopefully these tips help. If you want to work on these writing habits a little bit more and think through when you're going to do some of the strategizing, we are offering a workshop on July 28th from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, New York time. And that workshop is a 3-hour workshop where we will cover all of how to plan your academic writing habits and work them in around your teaching, your service, any health issues, childcare issues, any COVID-related kind of clinches to your schedule. And we do encourage everybody to sign up. The cost is pretty cheap. It's just $50 for the registration plus the processing fee for Eventbrite. So it's under $55 for the whole thing. And certainly many of you can use faculty development funds. If you have those available, that's certainly an option for you. One last thing too about this workshop, if by chance you have a conflict and you would just like a recording of it, you can also register and get that recording. Just let me know, Christine, CHRISTINE @defendandpublish.com. So that's certainly an option for you. You get takeaway templates, and we encourage everybody to join us for that. If not, and you're not able to do it, you might check out certainly the article that's up here, this What Do Professors Do During a Writing Session, because I do give some very detailed strategies that might be workable for you. And there might be some in there that you can kind of patch together to make your own writing habit system, or you might see some new ideas to help tweak your writing. Hopefully that helps this week. Happy writing.